Just a quick note here at the start of the interview. First off, I want to thank BJERGSEN so much for doing this with me. It really means a lot. I love being able to interview players when they retire, and so it's just fantastic. I think there's a lot in here that you will all really enjoy, especially as we get later into some of the questions. Secondly, I want to thank all of you for supporting me over the course of this year. I do have a couple of videos that will still hit this channel, but this is the last major big video of the year. So thank you to everyone who supported me. On that note, I'm trying to hit a pretty good number of subscribers by the end of the year. So if you can subscribe if you haven't yet, that would be really helpful so you don't miss any of the stuff or the videos I've got planning in the next couple of weeks. And then also, I'm going to put my Twitter link in a pinned comment at the top. If you can follow me on Twitter, I lost a couple recently, I think, just, I don't know, algorithm or something. So that would be super helpful. Finally, just one quick note. In this interview, I tried to record two separate files, one of me and one of BJERGSEN, so that we could do something kind of fancy with like singles of him and all that. Unfortunately, one side effect that happened was due to a glitch. We only have footage of me for the first 30 minutes. So that's where you're going to see when I'm asking questions. There's like B-roll and that kind of thing. Not too big of a deal, but just wanted to call it out so that everybody understood, and trying to be transparent with you guys whenever funny things like that happen. Either way, thanks so much, and I hope you enjoy this interview. Well, I'm joined today by BJERGSEN from TSM to talk about his career and his decision to retire this year. For this retirement interview, I'm really happy that we were able to sit down and talk together, though I wish this was in person, because I always kind of had this idea of when you or Peter or other big figures in the league retired, being able to sit down with them. But I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, no problem. This is just the world that we're in right now.
Yeah, no,
That's
it's
what we
true.
have to do.
Well, so anyway, there's a lot to get into, and first off, before we get into anything, we were just talking a little bit, but how's the off season been for you? Because I assume it's a very different experience.
Yeah, the off season is not a very fitting name when you're on the staff side. It more so becomes a roster and prepping season. So I don't really get the same time off that you kind of enjoy as a player, but I've been learning a lot of new things, and it's been really exciting kind of being a part of building a roster and all the workings behind the scenes, as well as preparing for the season, what that looks like, working with all of my staff and the players to be as ready as we can for day one of practice. So I'm doing a lot of things that I've never done before, and but luckily I have people kind of helping me out and guiding me as well.
Nice. Well, I want to talk about that in a little bit, but first, let's talk a little bit about your career and just kind of look back on it. My plan for this conversation, and I know you have a meeting, so it can't be super long, but it's just kind of look back at your career, talk about that, talk about the decision to retire, and then look ahead into some of the stuff that you've just been mentioning. So, first off, getting into it, I mean, I don't know if you remember, but how far back do you remember wanting to be a pro? And what was kind of the decision to pursue this? Did you ever anticipate it becoming what it did?
I want to say that when I first thought about becoming a pro, it was during some Season 2 tournament. I remember that Ocelot and Shushay were in it, so it's a very early Season 2 tournament. I don't remember exactly what the name was. I think it was maybe like an IM in Germany or something.
Yeah.
And that was after I had watched Season 1 Worlds, and then I kind of realized, oh, there's actually multiple tournaments popping up now. People are starting to make money, make a living. I'm starting to recognize these faces as, oh, these guys are the pro players, and that this is actually something they can do. And I was watching a lot of their streams as well. Dyrus, Ocelot, all these people back in the day. And I was far from good enough to be a pro at that time, but that's when I first realized that, oh, this actually seems like a viable career path if you're good enough.
Yeah. And so you decided to go for it. I still remember the Deficio interview where on stage he cursed at you, I think, about that. And you originally started, I mean, so many LCS and League fans came in to the scene much later than this, but you started playing in Europe in the very beginning, yes?
Yeah, that was Deficio saying F you, because we qualified for the LCS qualifier, essentially, but I wasn't old enough to play in the LCS qualifier because I was only 16. And a lot of the way we won games was kind of revolved around me and setting me up to win. But then I was subbed in by someone named Kautard, who he was a better team player and more sacrificial as a player. And I pretty much thought that there's no way that they would qualify without me. And when they did, he hit me with that, and it was surprising. I think it was surprising to everyone because they were playing against. My memory doesn't serve me, but it was Tab's team um, that everyone thought was one of the absolute favorites, and they ended up beating them. So I don't think anyone expected them to win, including themselves. But it was obviously really amazing, even though I wasn't able to participate. Just the fact that my team qualified was really cool.
Oh. Is it funny to think back to kind of the person that you were then? Because I imagine you're just a very different person now, having had all this experience. And so this young kid who's too young to even compete in the qualifiers, watching all this stuff happen, must have been a really interesting experience for you.
Yeah, it was a big ego hit, honestly, that my team was able to win without me, and that Kautar was able to do so many things that I wasn't really at the time. Like, he was really good at using teleports from mid lane to side lanes to counter gank and help his teammates get ahead and make proactive TP plays and play these more supportive champions. Like, I think Morgana mid was kind of his specialty, where I was playing REZ, Fizz, Cassio, trying to carry the game by myself. So I think that was one of the early times where I realized that there's more value you can bring than putting the team on your back.
Yeah.
Because he was doing a really good job of setting others up to succeed, even though on paper he wasn't as good of a player as I was.
So it wasn't long into your career, especially when you look at how long it's been, that you ended up joining TSM and moving to the LCS. I mean, I think so many fans know you exclusively as that guy on TSM who comes from Europe. But what was the decision like to come over here? And did you anticipate that you would be in the States for so long? I mean, did you have any idea that this would become your life?
I think I talked about it back then, but a lot of it was just the infrastructure in NA, especially around team houses. My team back then, Copenhagen Wolves, I was promised a team house many times, and it was just around the corner, and we were just about to sign the lease, but it never happened, and we just stayed in a hotel for about a year. But I saw the TSM house, the Curse mansion, and all these things, and it seemed like there was a lot more stability there, and I didn't have a lot of control over what was even happening in my roster. Like, the org was kind of kicking some of my teammates, even though I didn't fully agree with some of the decisions that were made, and I felt like it's only a matter of time before that might be me. So I was entertaining different NA offers. I think another one was Curse as well, was interested in me at the time, but I think if you get an offer from TSM, even to this day almost, I mean, of course there are teams that are a lot tighter than it was back in the day, but if you get an offer from TSM, it's kind of a no-brainer, I think.
And did you, in your mind, I mean, did you think about the future much whenever you came over here, or did you expect, oh, I'm going to do this for a little bit and then maybe I'll go back to EU LCS? Or because you ended up staying over here, you ended up staying with TSM this entire time, the rest of your career. So did you have any idea that that's how this would turn out?
No, I was kind of just taking it 1 year at a time, especially since I was struggling a lot in school with being bullied, and those things were still kind of haunting me. Even though I was at a new school or people weren't bullying me, I had a hard time connecting with people, and I didn't feel comfortable there just because of all my memories. So each thing was just like, how can I stay out of school 1 more year or another 6 months? And that was kind of my driving force, is that I need this, I need to get better, and I need to be one of the top professional players so that I don't all of a sudden just get kicked and I'm forced back in school.
Yeah.
Because I think my parents even had to sign something that I have a job in this other place, otherwise the government is going to force you to go to school until you finish high school. But I was pretty much exempt because I had this job, so I had to keep this job.
I know you've talked a lot about this in previous interviews, and so we don't need to go down that road again, but I am kind of curious, reflecting on the person that you were coming over here, you know, having had really bad experiences in school, wanting to, you know, have this drive to make sure that you could continue to do this instead of having to go back. How much of a different person are you now? You know, do you still think about that stuff, or is it just you look at yourself now and you're like, completely different individual?
I don't think about it too much, but I can't even compare myself to the person that I was back then. Though I think it's fairly normal. I mean, 17 or 16 to 24, you grow a lot. These are really important years in people's development, and I think even my growth was stunted a lot due to a lot of the experiences that I had in my childhood. So I had to learn and grow at a really accelerated rate. But I barely even remember what it was like back then. But I do remember some really awful things. Like I had a lot of anxiety about really, really tiny things, really small social interactions, or even when I got into someone's car, like how hard do I slam the car door? These were things that I would actually be legitimately anxious about back then. So life was hell, and things are much better now.
Yeah. Well, when I was reflecting on your career for your retirement, one of the videos that I saw that was on the TSM subreddit that they had pulled was the video of you showing up to the TSM house and Wild Turtle and Dyrus and Oddwin, I think it was, answering the door. It took me to that video to remember even that those were the players that you started with, because they've been retired for so long. And so, I'm kind of curious over the years as you've moved from like that, now what feels like ancient generation of League of Legends pros, to this past year where like you were playing alongside Spica, who now is considered one of the most exciting new faces in the LCS. What has it been like to sort of see all these players pass through TSM and to have experienced all these different rosters over these years?
You definitely see a lot of different people and a lot of different drive. I think one of the things that I picked up early is just that you have to be really adaptive if you want to play for a long time, because I've seen a lot of players throughout my career that they found a certain level of success playing a certain way, practicing a certain way, being a certain way, and that's kind of just what they stuck to, and they never really grew. But as the industry, as the competition, as the players, and the way that people practice is even continuing to improve to this day, they just weren't really adapting and leveling up. And I saw those people, just losing their careers around me and retiring. So there was a lot of reminders to kind of stay open-minded and keep looking for the next thing that can make me even better or improve me even further. And especially after every season, in the off season, I spend a lot of time thinking about, what did I do well? What didn't I do well? What is kind of like the future of esports? Because esports is still very underdeveloped in many ways. And I just really enjoyed that process always.
Yeah. Are there rosters that you reflect on, and no disrespect to any of the other rosters that you've been with, but was there any roster in your mind where you're like, that was the TSM roster I'll remember most, or is this is the lineup that really will stick with me as I reflect on my career?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. It's the Hanser, Svenskar, and Doublelift Bifrost roster. I think I definitely took that for granted. Obviously, we made a lot of changes after the 2017 Worlds, even though we had only been together for a year and a half, just because it seemed like the issues that we were facing were kind of insurmountable. And rather than figuring out and looking at them from a different angle, we just thought we would find more success replacing some of the players. That obviously wasn't true, and it taught me a lot about going from being on such a successful team, stomping everyone, to in 2018 we lost in quarterfinals to Clutch, and we were frankly like just an average middle of the pack team. I really learned a lot about what makes a great team and the things that I had taken for granted before that just kind of naturally worked out because of how we were as players, or the things that other leaders like Doublelift brought to the team that I wasn't even aware of at the time.
Do you think that had you stuck with that roster, you would have been able to make more progress with it? I mean, it sounds like you have at least some regrets around the decision to overhaul the team so much. So do you think that things would have been different if you could have stuck with that team, or was there like a cap that you guys had hit?
I wouldn't say regret in that sense, because I did learn a lot from it, even though it might not have been the best decision to make. I don't know how we would have done the next year, because maybe some of the issues we would have been able to improve on, or maybe these were just issues that weren't really going to get better. One thing that I also noticed is when your team is so highly successful, especially domestically, it's hard to really tackle all the core issues because you just keep winning. And if you keep winning, then people feel like, yeah, I'm getting criticism around this thing, but also we're always winning. So they don't really take these things to heart as much. And that's really kind of tough for me to witness because I always try to push myself to learn, no matter how scrims, no matter how matches are going. I try to be really critical of myself, and it's really easy to get complacent when you win a lot. So I think it's hard to say if we would have kept progressing, but in hindsight, I think we should have definitely given it another year because we only played together for a year and a half, I believe.
Yeah. I know in your career you've had a ton of success, and yet obviously a lot of people will look at the international record for TSM and be disappointed that more could not have been achieved. And I'm curious from your perspective, now that you've retired, and I'm sure you've spent a lot of time reflecting on your own career, how much does it impact you that you weren't able to make it further at these international events despite, the domestic dominance that you personally had?
Yeah. I mean, the way I see it is that it's not over for me. And just because I'm the coach and I'm not one of the players on the Rift, it doesn't mean that if I'm able to take my players further, that that's not me. Because I think a coach, well, not all coaches have big impacts, but I believe a really great coach can have a really big impact on the team. And that's also why I don't love the word retired, because I feel like I'm still as in the team and as big of a part of a team as I was as a player. So it's sad that I wasn't able to get more success as a player internationally, but I don't think that book is closed, and I think that I can go even further as a coach than I ever did as a player. That's my current goal.
That's really cool to hear. I mean, on that note, I've wondered in the past, and a lot of people have speculated, for a long time it was like, oh, is BJERGSEN going to leave and go back to LEC? Is he going to go over there and join a European team because he just can't find the success as a player perhaps in North America? And, I'm kind of curious now that you have transitioned from the player role to the coach role. During your time as a player, was that ever a consideration for you? Did you ever sit down and reflect on, the end of a year after a tough Worlds and think, hey, should I do this?
Yeah, I definitely thought about it, especially I think it was last year, 2019, that my contract was coming up. And I was entertaining whether I should think about going back to Europe. I wasn't really thinking about any Asian countries because I think that communication is really important, and I would not be the same player or the same leader or teammate if I can't speak the language fluently. I've worked speaking through a translator, and it really doesn't get the same point across and the same connection. But at the time, I think Nemesis had just played a year or half a year with Fnatic, so I didn't really see them replacing him with me, especially since I hadn't really been doing that well for the last 2 years. Obviously, G2 had caps and perks, and if you are to go to LEC, you really should. Those are the teams that you join, right? Fnatic and G2, those are the teams that have consistently won over the last years. I was thinking about looking at opportunities in other teams, but I talked to Reggie about why we had sucked so much in the last 2 years, and we were actually really aligned. We had a lot of the same ideas about what had gone wrong, even though he wasn't really super involved or not. He wasn't there for the day-to-day, and he wasn't even watching all of the matches, but still, he could tell what were some of the really cultural things that were wrong within the team. And they really lined up with what I thought, and we kind of made a plan to try to do better. And we did win a championship in summer. I think, obviously, we didn't do very well at Worlds, and we didn't do very well in spring, but some change was made, and then we were at least able to find another trophy.
You mentioned the free agency time, and I think a lot of people were really curious building up to that. Is there a chance that BJERGSEN leaves TSM? You mentioned considering LEC if there had been a top team that had been interested or had a space for you. Did you ever consider leaving TSM? Because I know, like TSM, you have a great relationship with the leadership over there. And so I'm kind of curious if that was even a consideration you had in your mind.
of course I considered it, but I just don't think I would be able to really live with myself if I joined TSM at their high and then left them after 2 years of mediocrity. Because I came into a team that was already the best. And sure, I was good individually, but I didn't really do much to make that team the best. I just came into a system that was already working, and I used my hands on the keyboard and mouse to display the game. And with time, in 2018, 2019, we were not doing well. And I felt like I kind of owed it to Reggie and everyone at TSM to bring this team back to its former glory. So I was definitely considering it, but after my talk with Andy and about how much we kind of aligned on the issues, I felt like I would have possibly a lot of regrets if I was to leave now and not knowing if acting on these things would really make the difference in 2020 and moving forward.
I know this is a tough question, and I do want to talk to you about your decision to transition into the coaching role, but do you ever look at, for instance, Caps and the place that he was able to end up with LEC and staying there or not moving over here and think, and wonder, like, should you have stayed in Europe? Should you have stayed in EULCS or LEC? Would you have had more international success if you had been the rock star you were here, but over in that more competitive region?
Yeah, but also, I mean, not many people know this, but TSM picked me up like on my way into the relegation tournament. So sure, I was playing pretty well individually, maybe during the regular season, but during the playoffs. Actually, funnily enough, we were in playoffs, but if you got last place in playoffs, you actually went to relegation.
Yeah, I remember.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
He's coming up.
I'll tolerate that cat for this interview.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Travis.
That's okay. Yeah, I can deal with it.
And I actually played really poorly in the playoffs, and we ended up going to the relegation tournament. But I guess free agency was in between the relegation or the playoffs and relegation tournament, so I didn't end up playing. But what I'm trying to say is just I wasn't hot shit that everyone was trying to go after, and I didn't feel like that. And I felt like, honestly, an imposter that I was even able to get picked up by TSM and that I was probably going to fail and disappoint them. So at the time, I was happy to get any opportunity, let alone such a big opportunity. So I was happy to just jump at it.
Is there a moment from your career as a professional player that just stands out to you as like the most iconic moment for you, the most wonderful moment, the one that you'll cherish the most as an accomplishment or a win or anything like that?
I think it's between the IEM that we won, the World Championship that I have, my World Championship trophy.
Katowice, yeah.
And my first LCS win. I think the Katowice was really special because a lot of my family was there watching live in the crowd. Because it was in Poland, they were able to, I think they drove up there, but they don't really have the opportunity to go to a lot of my tournaments in the US. So winning against a Korean team, winning against a Chinese team with my family there, felt really, really good. And that was just a really special experience for me. And obviously winning my first LCS championship was a really special moment as well. I think it was at PAX in Seattle. And even coming into that, we were kind of the underdog. And I wasn't expecting us to go very far, but we clutched out a lot of really long, intense series. And I think we won in Game 5 off of Turtle, just getting the most random RNG crits as Tristana in the final team fight. And yeah, it was just an unbelievable feeling.
Yeah.
It really was.
So let's talk about the decision to, I know you don't like the word retire, but the decision to no longer be a player.
Yeah.
How long, because you referenced, I think, in your video when the stuff got announced that you had been considering it, and it was a huge shock. I feel like I do not think anybody expected it. But how long had you been considering it? Even last year when you re-signed with TSM, was this something in your mind that like you didn't know how much longer you wanted to play, so maybe sticking with them would be good, or What was kind of this process?
I think about a year and a half ago, in the middle of 2019, I was struggling a lot with how much I should be focusing on myself and how much I should be kind of spending time coaching my teammates and spending time watching my teammates play and helping them improve. That was a really tough balance for me. And I think that's when I started. I think working with Mithy really helped me with this, but Mithy is a person, he's just always really aware of how everyone is feeling, what the team's issues are in and out of game. He's just really tuned into the entire practice environment and all of their teammates. And kind of a year and a half after playing with him, I think that started rubbing off on me a bit. And I really realized the value in having a person like that on the team. But it was also overwhelming because when you start really noticing all the issues that are going on, it can be hard for you to play well individually because you feel like you need to fix all these problems within the team. And that was kind of the struggle that I had. And I guess around that time, I just realized that one day I'm going to be a coach. And right now I'm going to try to balance this as best as I can. And I want to try to sacrifice my individual play as little as possible. But I see all these things that are going on. I don't think the staff, the management is effectively addressing almost any of these things. I don't think I can effectively address these things while also being a player myself, though I tried. But I just kind of knew that one day I would really enjoy being the main person whose responsibility is to align the team and work on all these problems. But going into this year, into 2020, it wasn't really on my mind. I started thinking about it more towards the end of spring because I felt like our team was extremely dysfunctional. And I was trying to work a lot with Peter Zhang and all the staff. We had a pretty large staff at the time around how to work on all these issues. But at that time, I was actually really considering going into coaching for summer split, but it's almost impossible to find a mid laner between spring and summer. So Parth pretty much just told me that, please just play this one split. I'll come in and I'll do whatever you tell me to do. Like, I will be the coach, but essentially it'll be more of a player-run team, and you can tell me exactly what you're noticing, what you want me to do differently. I spent tens of hours on prep leading into the season, talking to the staff about what kind of culture, how we should be practicing. I talked to all the coaches and leaders across all the teams that I knew. I talked to Curry on FlyQuest, obviously Zigslaw, Missy, Perks. I just talked to everyone that I knew in the league scene to try to be as smart as I could about how to make a successful team. And then I tried to relay that to the staff, and to some degree it paid off. I mean, we won the split and I felt really good about that. But at Worlds, I couldn't keep up individually while trying to assist the staff so strongly. Not that the staff weren't doing things on their own, obviously they were, but I was being challenged so much individually by all these really good mid laners that that's kind of what I went back to focusing on. And during Worlds and during the boot camp, as people can tell on TSM Legends and all these things, our teamwork and team play really started falling apart. And we weren't a cohesive team anymore.
Do you think at Worlds, if you guys had not gone 0-6, you had gone 3-3, or you made it out of groups or something, that you would have still retired?
Yep. I'm pretty positive that I would have. I try not to think about it because I don't want it to affect my play or anything like that. But it was kind of hard not to, seeing all the issues going on around me and feeling like I could only do so much, and that I was also lacking as a player individually when playing against these players like Knight, Angel. They're all amazing players, and there were definitely some thoughts going through my head even before we played any matches that I think that I could have been adding more value to this team if I could just exclusively focus on all of the team problems, and I wouldn't have to worry about kind of keeping up as a professional mid laner. And I tried to put those thoughts aside, obviously, and focus on performing and focusing on bettering myself and still working with the team or working on improving everything that was wrong with the team. But I did have feelings come up that, especially when we reach this level of competition, I think that I could actually be a lot more impactful as a coach than as a player.
Yeah. So it sounds like professional reasons were a big part of the reason why you decided to move into the coaching role. You felt like you could achieve more for the team. I have to ask, were there personal reasons at all as well? Because we ask so much of our pro players, and I know how much you have sacrificed in order to stay competitive in the LCS for so many years. Like, so many people who play, they get older, their priorities change, they start to miss family, or they want to go out more, they want to develop other skill sets, they start seeing somebody. Any of these different things happen, in their performance drops because they aren't investing as many hours into solo queue, they aren't doing all this. And so I am curious if on your end there were any personal reasons you're like, I just want more time, I need to be able to do this. I have, you don't want to invest as everything that you have into remaining a competitive mid laner.
I definitely noticed that I wasn't able to just grind the game as much as I could before. It started feeling a bit more tiring. Not that I still enjoyed the game, but I had a hard time just putting in the insane amount of games every single week. But there weren't really too many other personal reasons. I mean, I've talked to players that go into coaching, and some of them expect the work to be less. Honestly, I don't. I think that you can work just as much, if not more, as a coach, and that there's always things that you can do. Just like when you're a professional player, there's always more that you can do as a coach. You can always study more drafts, more VODs. You can always work with your players more, build better relationships. So I think I'm going to transfer the same mindset into the coaching role, which means that I don't think I'm going to be working a lot less. I don't think I'm going to have just randomly a lot more time to do all these things. I think I'm still going to have a really kind of single-minded focus on my goal, and that I'll be putting in just as much time, but just in a different way and with new goals, and with a kind of renewed excitement, because I get to do something I'm passionate about and something that's kind of different than what I have been doing.
I've talked to many pro players who became coaches once they were coaches, and also, though I don't know too much about traditional sports, I know one thing that is frequent over there is that players who do become coaches over there get frustrated because you go up there on stage, you help with draft, etc. Then the players go, and there's nothing you can do. It's not one of the games where you can be on comms and help direct the players like, no, you guys need to go to Baron or something. So is there, how confident are you that you will not have a moment where you are like, I need to come back, or if I just was in there, I could fix this, or, something like that?
It definitely always looks a lot simpler from the outside than it really is in the game, both executing things individually, but also getting everyone on the same page as a team to execute strategies, rotations, setups, any of these things. So I'm sure I'll have moments where I feel like, why can't we execute this really basic thing? It's so easy, but I think a little bit less since I have been in the game and I know how difficult it can be. And I have also watched myself play, and I know that I'm far from a perfect player, and I also make a ton of mistakes. I've already told PoE, of course, he came in with some concerns around like, hey, is there any chance that you're just going to like kick me out and take your spot back or something?
Yeah.
And I told him that there's obviously no way. And I think I'm the kind of person, when I make a decision to do something, I'll stick with it. But of course, I can't say that whether 1 year, 2 years down the line, I end up changing my mind, because I see a lot of players or people across all kinds of sports that end up coming back, even though they're so sure that they will never come back. But for now, I'm really happy with the move that I made, and I've really enjoyed the coaching role. And I think that, to me, it seems like it's the thing that I'll be doing for a really long time, and I don't see myself coming back.
I know that you have always been so focused on the competition, but your retirement from being a pro player, your transition to being a coach, has huge impacts across TSM as a business and as an entity, and also with the LCS. I mean, especially in tandem with Doublelift retiring shortly thereafter, you guys were the biggest faces, and their LCS had a Twitter poll recently where they like, which player are you going to miss more, Doublelift or Bjergsen? 75% of the answers came in Bjergsen.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah. So did you think about this at all? Was TSM at any point in time like, hey, we really like having you as a player. There's a lot of fans. I mean, did you reflect at all on like what your transition over to a coach would mean just for the LCS as a brand, because you occupy so much of the fandom?
Somewhat. I mean, I always felt like I was, at least in the last 3 years, that I was kind of the second man behind Doublelift. And I obviously didn't know moving into my role that he also would not be playing. So I didn't really think that it would have that big of an impact on the league. But now that both of us are gone, and just the amount of outreach and kind words that I've gotten from a lot of people with how me and my story have affected them, um, I don't know. I guess to me, it still feels like I'm in the scene, and it still feels like I'm here, and I'm still working towards the same goal. I'm even in the same team, so to me, it doesn't feel that differently. But I can understand that to a lot of other people, it does. Um, so yeah, I guess I just don't feel like I'm completely gone.
For Bjergsen fans out there, is there any chance we're going to see more content from you now? I know you said you're going to put a ton of time into coaching, but I mean, it's I guess on public record that you made it so that you wouldn't have to stream at all as part of your continuation with TSM, for instance. Are there going to be Bjergsen streams? Are there going to be moments where you talk about stuff anywhere, any kind of that type of thing?
I'm not big on content. I'm not gonna lie. I like to be kind of like a private person. I think I am more of a private person. Um, but I know that in the past, Parth has tanked a lot of interviews for players after losses, and I know that. And honestly, I'm happy to do that for my players as well. I know what it feels like to lose. I know that sometimes you just don't want to talk to anyone. So you might see more interviews with me now.
Great news for me.
But streams and content and all these things, I don't really think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just kind of be focusing on myself and my craft.
Fair enough. We've kind of already transitioned to this part of the conversation, but you mentioned a little bit about some of the ways in which Mithy helped you think differently about coaching, even whenever he was just playing with the team. But the public has such a limited understanding of what makes a good coach, and I don't even know if like teams or LCS or League of Legends esports still has a good idea of what makes a good coach. And so, do you think that there's like a singular type of good coach out there, or there's just a bunch of different types? And I mean, what is kind of your philosophy on coaching as you transition into this role?
I think it's a tough question to answer because you can be a good coach in many different ways, and no staff is just one person. I think it's pretty common for staff to have 3 to 4 people now. So I think it's more so about finding people that where their strengths and weaknesses kind of align and they can cover for each other. And you can be a great coach in the sense that you're excellent at drafting, you're great at leading, you're great at working with people, or you can be a great coach in the way that someone like Kaze is, who came in and worked with us halfway through last split, where he's really focused on the macro game, support jungle movement, and he has the best scouting that I've ever seen in my career. And he doesn't need to do everything. He just needs to be the best at what he's doing. And of course, as a head coach, you have more things to balance, and you have to also manage your staff. And that's something that I'm still learning about. But I think one thing that's kind of that we'll start to see is that I think it's just different when you've been a player and when you play the game at a high level and you go into coaching, because you just have a different feeling for the game. You're just able to kind of recognize how things should play out. You know what it's like being in the game. You have the same understanding and read of the game as the players do. Even if you don't play the game as much anymore, I think that that's just a feeling that you can't really get by watching the game. Of course, you can be extremely smart about the game, but I think there's something different about having played the game at a really high level. And we also see it in other sports. A lot of really excellent coaches around the world have played that sport at a high level before.
Yeah. Do you have an idea for how long you're going to coach?
Mm,
Could your coaching career end up being much longer than your player career?
I think it definitely could. I've never really been one to think more than, I don't know, 1-2 years ahead, because I feel like I'm still changing a lot, and the things that I want might change a lot over the next couple of years. But I just try to kind of revise how I'm feeling and what I'm doing once every year or so. So right now I'm just planning on coaching for as long as I can, and I think I obviously have a lot of place to grow in this role, and I'm not going to be doing a perfect job immediately, but it is something that I'm really passionate about and something that I'm really excited to do, and I think it's something that I could do for a long time.
As a former player, do you think you're going to have a lot of ways to support the players on your team? And I'll expand on that a little bit too, because it's tough, I think, oftentimes for teams, GMs, coaches who haven't been players in the past to understand how to manage things like burnout and how long before a player is like really having a tough time, how to manage things like how much do you practice at certain points in time in the year? How do you prepare for international events? How much do you think your time as a player will help you manage that? And do you think that you'll approach it in a very different way than perhaps other teams or other coaches do?
I think that I have a fairly unique perspective because I've tried a lot of things. I've tried the lifestyle of just grinding games and grinding as many games as I could, and being in Korea for 1 to 2 month long boot camps and almost only eating canned tuna from 7-Eleven, because if I was to go out to a restaurant, that's 1-2 solo games that I'm missing, and I wanted to just play as much as I could. And then in more recent years, and especially in this year, I was a lot more focused on kind of the holistic aspects: exercise, diet, kind of mental health, and your personal well-being, and how that spills into being a better performer and putting more effort into your day-to-day practice. Kind of efficiency over quantity, though you don't want to go too low on quantity, because League is still a game where you have to practice a lot. There are a lot of champions. The game is always changing. It's never going to be a 9-to-5 job, but at a certain point, I don't think it's worthwhile sacrificing your health and your sleep to play a couple more games. So I think I've tried a lot of different things, and all my players are at different points in their lives and in their journey of figuring out how they will best perform. And I haven't even figured out how I perform best, but I've tried a lot of different things, and some have definitely worked better than others for me. And I think that'll be really helpful in connecting with my players on those things.
How's it been with this specific roster, building it out over the off season? Because I know that's like at one point in time, Doublelift was going to be on it, then he wasn't. Then there were questions about if you guys were getting Sword Art, so many different things. And so how strange has it been to be on that side? I'm sure even as a player, you still had some sort of involvement in it. And what's sort of your assessment of the final roster that you were able to build?
Yeah. When people talk about how stressful the roster building off season is, now I understand, because it very quickly goes from, oh, we're going to have a great roster, to we might not be able to get any pieces, and we also need a plan for kind of rebuilding in case that happens. So you never really know what's going to happen until you actually get the players locked in. So it's definitely a really stressful time, but I think that we got a really great roster, almost exactly the one that I wanted, and all the players that I wanted. I think all of our players are really good. I think we have, obviously, Huni, I think, is a really underrated player. I actually watched all of his games from Summer Split, and I thought that he was playing extremely well on EG, but that the public opinion is just not very good, and I'm not really sure why. He has been playing on not the best teams for a long time, but I think this is really a player that I can work with, and he can really shine and be the best top laner in NA again. And pretty consistently, he was also one of the players that kind of gave BB the hardest time in a lot of matches, I felt like. I think he's just a really strong player, and probably one of the most criminally underrated on our roster. Of course, Lost still has a lot to prove as well. But I think we're going to see these players that did really well in academy, like Fudge, Palafox, and Lost, that they are actually top caliber players. And before even the end of spring, I think they're going to be some of the best performers in the league.
So many people are like, "Oh, who's going to be the best, Cloud9 or Team Liquid?" What's your reaction to the fact that it feels like so many people are saying that these are the top two teams headed into lock-in tournament and spring split?
I'm okay with that. I think that rosters don't always play out the way that they are on paper. I think TL no longer has Kane now, and he's been really instrumental to a lot of their success. And I mean, I think Perks is an amazing player, and I'm sure that he will do really great things with C9. So I'm really excited to play against him. I don't really listen too much to those things or the tier list and the rankings and all these things, because I think that no one really knows. And especially for a spring split, the teams that people expect to be on the top almost always aren't. A lot of it is just about getting really basic fundamentals down and basic team play, whereas in summer it's more about kind of hitting your peak as a team. So I think spring, especially the lockdown tournament, is going to be
lockdown tournament. They could also call it that, given
it
the state that we're in
well.
right now in LA. But.
Yeah, I think especially that one is going to be really unexpected, and some teams that people might not even be considering could actually come up and perform really well.
What will people be able to blame you for as a coach? Because you probably have an idea of where your philosophy is going to be, what you'll be involved in. So are people going to be able to like, wow, Bjergsen's draft was shit this game. He lost us the whole match. What the hell? Or are you going to be less involved with draft? I mean, where should people blame and celebrate your successes as the split goes on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to say that draft will be my primary responsibility. So when the drafts suck, you know where to go, who to talk to. Of course, I'll be working with the players on drafts. I'm not going to be the one doing everything, but ultimately I am responsible for having a cohesive and good composition. But honestly, as the head coach, you can pretty much blame me for anything. So if a player is not playing well, you can blame me. If a draft is not good, you can blame me, because these are all things that I have a hand in. Of course, I can't work miracles, but it really is ultimately my responsibility that the team is performing well.
Yeah. Well, I think that about does it for me. I'd just like to give you the floor to perhaps say anything you would like to any of the fans and folks across the LCS and the industry as a whole who have cheered you on and supported you over the years. Anything at all you'd like to say to any of those folks?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that you guys feel similar to me. I hope that you don't feel like this is some kind of goodbye or some kind of retirement, that I'll still be there. You can still cheer for me. You can still criticize and praise me. And that I hope that you also support me, because this is what I want and this is what I feel the happiest doing. I think that I wouldn't be able to perform well if I kept playing just because I felt like I should, but it wasn't really what I wanted at the bottom of my heart. So, yeah, I hope that you guys are supportive of this transition, and I'm really excited to see how well I can do with this team, because I think we have a really good roster.
Well, I want to thank you so much for the time that you spent in LCS. I'm really happy that you came over so many years ago. Interviewing you, as infrequent as maybe they are, because I know you dislike content, has always been a great pleasure, because you have always given such thoughtful answers, and I know that you really do care in a way that not every pro that has come through the LCS has. I think a lot of people do, but I think you really, really wanted to succeed, and you pushed TSM to a new level and really helped define what LCS was over these past few years. So thank you so much, Bjergsen, for talking to me today and for competing in the LCS. And I know this is not a retirement, you're transitioning to coaching, but it does feel like a bit of an end of an era for the LCS player side. So thank you so much again for all these years competing.
Maybe you'll get to interview me more often if my team is losing a lot.
Yes, well, I can just cross my fingers for that, I guess.
I'll give you some winners interview as well.
That would be great. Yes, I'd love some winner interviews as well. For everyone else, you can check out the rest of my coverage of all things LCS leading up to the start of 2021 season right here on my YouTube channel.
No. I can just walk out, and it can just be a double if interview all of a sudden.
No. That's
Let me ask the goddamn questions. Dude, what do you think about that matchup, Azir Veigar, man? That was
a free matchup.
Why did your jungler walk through a ward that you knew was there and then get counter ganked?
No comment.
No, I'm just trolling.
We are working on it.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress.
Travis, come back. I asked two hard-hitting questions, honestly.
You just wanted to flame him? That was it? That's the whole part of that cameo? I'm sorry. I'll never let him do that again.
Ho, ho, ho. It's the holidays. That's my best Santa impression. But regardless of what holiday you are a fan of or celebrate, or maybe you don't celebrate any holidays, but other people in your life do, you should consider checking out alienware.com/Travis. There's a link in the video description below because they've got amazing products that you can gift to a family member or a significant other or a friend or yourself. They make great gifts is what I'm getting at. And they also make great personal gifts for yourself to have, because maybe there's just nobody in your life anymore. They've retired from competitive play and now just want to play World of Warcraft, and they aren't interested in spending time with you. Regardless, you can check out great stuff at alienware.com/Travis and use Travis10 off Q4 to save 10% off your order.